We are the ministry of the real truth. And quite a while back, we had this strange idea when looking at the Egyptian wall reliefs or paintings at Luxor, Saqqara in Egypt, that the people on them were very, very different to the Egyptians portrayed in movies, Sarnetta TV's Egypt or ancient Kemet promoters, the followers, that they have featured on their live debates and the many books that we'd come across. Sure, there were those the size of the stocky Shaka Amos, who used to be on there quite frequently. He's the guy with the lock. And Michael Jordan in Michael Jackson's music video, Do You Remember the Time? He played the gong hitter, announcing the entertainers to the Pharaoh, played by Eddie Murphy. These peoples depicted were taller, very skinny, leg-wise, and had faces similar to comedian Rowan Atkinson's Mr. Bean. Then we saw a wall relief of one such Egyptian beating on a Shaka Amos Michael Jordan type, obviously, and pointed out as a Nubian slave within the information contained around it, surrounding it. So we pondered, then reflected upon people we had met. We made comparisons, who were all skin and bones and very, very tall. These people were very, very skinny. It's like, oh my gosh, is that guy getting any meat on him at all? Yeah, and then we pondered and reflected, then came to the realization who these people were that we had come across. They were from India, so they were Indians, not Africans, as everybody seems to think, until at some point where Nubians or other black Africans may have invaded Egypt and taken over, and their masters fled Egypt entirely. In fact, we're pretty sure that either Shaka Amos or other stated the Egyptians travelled to India and preached, taught them. You'd have to research this information for the facts, etc., to establish those facts, to prove that this is actually true. So of late, we found a book on statements to this effect. In the book Hindu States of Sumeria by Swami Sankarananda from India, published 1962. So we're going to have a look at that particular book. Here is some information on the cover. There was no cover. Preface. In this small book is revealed for the first time the influence exerted by Hindus on the culture of the Sumerians. From the Vedic age, when a batch of the Vedic people migrated en bloc or en masse to the fertile plain of the Euphrates Valley and founded small city-states. In later ages, the people from Mohenjo-Daro appeared in the area as the traders. The Vedic people had left their traces in the religious symbols they carved on stones and mud plaques. The funerary remains of the pictographs, while the people from Mohenjo-Daro had left their traces in a number of seals and hundreds of objects and of merchandise. In this small book, a short survey on the entire civilization has been made from the cultural and religious point of view. The subject is highly controversial, as the cultural finds were interpreted otherwise by the diggers and other scholars. The prevailing opinion of the Sumeriologists is that the idea of culture and civilization arrived in India from the Euphrates Valley. In this book, this view has been contradicted on the basis of the archeological finds, which were invariably of Indian origin. The religious symbolism and mythical representations are interpreted with the help of the Indian literature, showing that the Sumerians were the debtors and not the Hindus. In fact, Sumeria was the colonial empire of India. Sri Panchami, February 1962. Swami Sankarananda, Ramakrishna Vedanta math. The Sumerians. Of all the ancient races, the Sumerians were the nearest people to India. From their annals, it is learned that they migrated to the valley of the Euphrates from the east with a full-fledged civilization and culture, with the knowledge of working in metals like copper, gold, and silver, having a well-developed script and language, knowledge of architecture, and a well-developed religious symbolism. They say, since then, they had discovered nothing new, nor they improved the traditions they carried from their home. Hall identified this land of east with the Indus Valley and Rakhadas Banerjee with Kerala. But Woolley, might be Leonard Woolley, Egyptologist, was skeptic about the Indian origin of the Sumerians. The discovery of the Vedic religious emblems and the Indus Valley seals in Sumeria point clearly to India as the source of the culture and the people of Sumeria. Here we find that the race migration was from the east. The Egyptians. The national tradition of the Egyptians was that they were the immigrants to Egypt with a full-fledged culture. The archaeologists also discovered the truth of the tradition. Because these immigrants brought with them a culture which did not grow in the soil of Egypt, it appeared in Egypt suddenly without any previous evolutionary stages. They knew agriculture, working in metals, and had a well-developed script when they entered Egypt. The place from which they entered the Nile Valley was Punt, according to the Egyptian tradition. There is a great deal of controversy about the location of Punt. The current opinion is that Punt was Somaliland. Sir Wallace Budge, one of the top Egyptologists in his day, however, identified Punt with some place in Western Asia. But Punt, which means the land of the gods, points directly to India as the place meant by the term, for India was known and is still known as the Devabhumi, the land of the gods. Besides the name, the objects brought from Punt in mercantile expeditions also point to India, because the large amounts of scents, the larger number of cattle, and large numbers of pieces of wood point clearly to India as the source of those objects. So here also we find that the race migration took place from the east. The Phoenicians. The Phoenicians were the great trading people of the Mediterranean area. The land in which they lived was a strip between the Mount Lebanon and the Mediterranean. It was called Phoenicia from the name of the people. The capital city, Tyre, was founded in around 2730 BC, according to Herodotus, 244. Herodotus also recorded a tradition of the ancient home by the Erythraean Sea. Erythraean Sea was the Greek name for the ocean which they crossed to over India. The earlier scholars located the original home of the Phoenicians somewhere near the Red Sea. The modern historians are for a place near the Persian Gulf. Carthage was the second city of the Phoenician Empire, situated in North Africa. It is known from the records preserved that the Carthaginians called themselves Peoni. The word Peoni may be identified as a corrupt form of the Vedic word Pani, representing a trading class. So the Phoenicians also were probably the migrants from India. The Pani was probably a general term for the traders. They did not go out of the country in one batch. They went out batch by batch. The Etruscans, who wrote in a script in which there are at least 19 Indus characters, were probably the earliest migrants. This author had been able to decipher the name Pani from one of the Etruscan inscriptions. Here also the race movement was from the east. The Phoenicians, or Aramaic inscriptions, contain as many as 12 Indus characters out of the system of 22. From the above study, it is clear that neither the Ostraks, nor the Dravids, nor even the Aryans had any possibility to come down to India from places which nobody knows. To prove their immigration to India, sufficient data must be collected. Final expectations are no proofs. The self-deluded Hindus who were further deluded by these hypotheses of the European scholars must clear their minds from the century-long delusion, critically studying the hypotheses in the light of history and reason. It is high time that they should be free from all fear, which has become a national disease with the Hindus. They should be sufficiently strong in their minds and behaviour to be able to throw overboard all the false theories and hypotheses about the origin of the race and culture of the country. Outside home, the study of the ancient civilizations of Sumeria, Egypt, Crete and Syria, Palestine, in the light of the ancient literature of the Hindus and the archaeological finds of India will solve many riddles of the ancient history. It is probably for the first time that a cognate civilization, like that of the Sumerians, is studied critically with the help of the ancient Indian literature supported by the archaeological finds of India. And here's a footnote below which says this is the first book of the intended series when India ruled the West. The second proposed venture would be Hindu Emperors of the Egyptian throne. So when we looked at the Grand Bible, besides seeing that apparently the earth was flat, like a record, it spoke of trade route along the Nile, the Red Sea, etc., this green triangle, and it was a trade, like the Suez Canal, the Egyptians were working on, even in that era, was the trade route for India to Egypt. They better sail up there and trade. So trade with the Phoenicians or something like that, by the sounds of it. The country and environs. Sumeria was the creation of the Euphrates and the Tigris. So in its origin it was similar to the growth of the lands of the Indus and Gangetic plain in India and of the Nile Valley in Egypt. In their upper courses through Assyria and Elam, both the rivers had to pass through deserts and mountainous countries. But no sooner they had left the hilly country than they were in the land created by the alluvium carried by themselves. Here the resistance was less, so the overflowing rivers would cut new paths through the alluvium, leaving the old beds. Of these two, the Tigris underwent little change owing to its high banks. The mad fury of the Euphrates during the rains was sufficient to break through the banks built of sand and alluvium. The result was that the old cities were left in their place and the river moved away. Hence all the ancient cities of Sumeria are now located on the dried up beds of the Euphrates or its tributaries and branches. The position of the ancient courses of the Euphrates and its branches are now marked by the mounds covering the ancient cities, which are strewn all over the country on the dry beds of the Shat el Nil and the Shat el Kar, which lie considerably to the east of the present bed of the Euphrates. The mounds of Abu Haba, Te Ibrahim, Al Ahima and Nippur, marking the sites of the important cities of Sippur, Kutha, Kish and Nippur, lie to the east of the river. The last two are on the ancient bed of the Shat el Nil. The Euphrates, in 3,000 years of her life, had snatched much land out of the ocean and is now emptying herself in the Persian Gulf, a long way from the cities built on her by the Sumerians, on its confluence with the Eastern Sea. The ancient Sumerians cities which could be located were certainly Lhasa, Tello, Jokha, Farah, Abu Hatib, etc., etc. Excavations brought out a Parthian palace erected immediately over an ancient building built by the Gudea, whose bricks were partly used and partly imitated. Some of the bricks bear inscriptions in Aramaic and Greek characters. Some coins with Greek inscriptions also were discovered from the site. And it goes through all these places. The monuments and inscriptions from Tello, observed king, have furnished us with material for reconstructing the history of the city with but few gaps from the earliest age until the time when the dynasty of Eason succeeded to that of Ur in the rule of Sumer and Akkad, to the destruction of the city during the period of the first dynasty of Babylon. The finds. The Baburu Jataka, a birth tale of Buddha, was probably the only record of the relation of India with Babylon. In spite of absence of earlier literary notice of Babylon, the archaeological discovery had more than compensated the want. Unfortunately, the archaeological finds of Sumerian sites were never thoroughly studied by any Indian archaeologist or historian, so the relation of the Babylonian sites to India was overlooked. It is after the excavation of Mohenjo-daro and discovery of the Indus seals with inscriptions in Babylonia that did away with the isolation of Sumeria. But even then, the results of the excavations of the two countries were never studied together so as to discover a common basis of the culture and civilization of the two. And this particular writer was probably the first to make a serious attempt to relate the cultural relics of Sumeria with that of the Rig Vedic India. During the excavations of Sumerian sites, especially of Lagash, were discovered plaques with pictograms representing historical, mythological and religious ideas of the people. There were stelae of vultures in which were represented the scenes of battle, interring of the dead bodies, sacrifices of bulls and goats to the Mayans, together with the mythological idea of the manner of death in the net of Enlil, in which a bearded personage is seen to club the eagle to death. He caught also a number of men in the net to end their mundane existence. The sudden appearance of a certain metal indicates its importation. Bronze was known in India from the 5th millennium BC, so the bronze that appeared in the reign of Gudaya must have been imported from Mohenjo-daro. There are some bronze cones held in situ by deities, indicating a sacred significance of the cones. They were probably the seats of the gods, like the Vedic Upas or Tantric Sivalingas. That bronze was unknown in earlier epochs in Lagash has been proved by the following discussion presented by King in the Sumer and Akkad as. It should be noted that of the 7 objects from Nippur and other southern Babylonian sites which were submitted to analysis by Herr Otto Helm in Danzig, only 2 contained a percentage of tin, and it is from a Straton in Nippur dated by Professor Hilprecht himself after 300 AD. The still Usatig instrument, which like the now contained over 5% of tin, was not found in Nippur but is said to have come from a mound 30 miles to the south of it. Nothing is known with accuracy as to its dates. Like the people of Mohenjo-daro, the Sumerians used baked bricks in the earlier buildings and sun-dried bricks in later structures, indicating the loss of the forest causing loss in humidity. It is most noteworthy that jars were used in the offering of oblations, on which twigs of trees are put just like the modern usage in Bengal of jars full of water with a mango twig over it. In the treatment of the relation of the Sumerian civilization to the other contemporary civilizations, King tried to equate it with the pre-dynastic Egypt. It is surprising that India was totally ignored, though the Sumerians themselves told that they were immigrants from some eastern country. Here is a similarity between the temple with granaries of Babylonia and that of Mohenjo-daro. It is most interesting to note that boats are sparingly represented in the archaeological remains of Sumeria. In Mohenjo-daro, the boats were represented both in the seals and the inscriptions. Similar also was the case with the Cretan archaeological finds. So the Sumerians, after their settlement in the place, became an inland people and were mindful to agriculture rather than the maritime trade. They forgot all about the early heritage of the sea voyages. Hence, the marked absence of Sumerian seals and antiquities in Mohenjo-daro, while there was profusion of Indus Valley objects together with the inscribed seals in Babylonian cities. The trade was clearly one way. This one-way traffic gave the Indus people advantage over the Sumerians, who remained the purchasers of Indian commodities. The city Hindu kingdoms of Babylonia remained independent for a long time till they were annexed to the Babylonian Empire built by Hammurabi. A Neo-Hindu empire was formed in Babylonia by the Kassites, who took over the reins of the empire from the hands of the descendants of Hammurabi, which persisted for 600 years. With the fall of the Kassite Empire, the Hindu kingdoms in Babylonia came to an end. The later relation of Babylonia with India remained only in the field of trade and commerce. Authorities consulted: 1. The Rig Veda, 2. Brahmanas, 3. Puranas, 4. Panchatantra, 5. Sir John Marshall, Indus Civilization, and so forth. Hindu kingdoms in Sumeria. Chapter 1. The Vedic settlements. Modern Mesopotamia, the land between the twin rivers Euphrates and Tigris, was known as Babylonia. That would be including Ur of Chaldea, where Abraham came from, born in. Modern Mesopotamia, the land between the twin rivers Euphrates and Tigris, was known as Babylonia. Still earlier, the upper portion of this tract was Akkad and lower portion Sumer. The dividing line was very uncertain, so broadly speaking, Sumeria was in the delta of the twin rivers. It is now admitted that when the Sumerians were in their heyday, the sea was further up and the twin river emptied their water in the eastern sea below Tello, Abu Sharain and Mukayyar. The Euphrates now flows a longer way down to empty itself than it did 5,000 years ago. Up to the first half of the 19th century, controversies were raging around the existence of race as the Sumerians, till the discovery of the library at Nineveh. Henceforth, the arguments in favour of the existence of an independent Sumerian people in Babylonia gained in strength, because a number of Sumerian texts and compositions have been discovered from the royal palace of the Assyrian king Assurbanipal. Thus writes King about the find: a considerable number of tablets, though written in cuneiform script, do not show any affinity to the language of the Assyrians or Babylonians. Too many of these compositions, Assyrian translations, had been added by the scribes who drew them up, and on the other tablets were found lists of the words employed in the composition together with the Assyrian equivalent. Rowanson explained the list as a dictionary of words of a pre-baby. Okay, it's kind of hard there to see. Pre-Babylonian race. The later archaeological researchers have provided this assumption of Sir Rawlinson. It will be noted that at that time the entire country identified as Sumer was strewn over with mounds of different descriptions and sizes. These mounds were generally traced in the dried up beds of the Euphrates or some of its ancient branches. A survey and excavation has identified the following ancient sites in this area: Tello, the ancient Shirpula of Lagash; Abu Shrain, or ancient Eridu; Mukayyar, or ancient Ur; Lassa, or ancient Saukira; Shirapapak, or ancient Farah; Abu Hatib, or ancient Kisura; Nefa, or ancient Nippur. Of these, Tello or Lagash was opened first.